Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. My name is Douglas Gabriel, Thomas Paine, in the Ass of the Globalist, that is, and I'm with Michael McKibben, and I'm in shock. Michael, how are you today?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Well, I don't know. Betsy and I both had to pick ourselves up off the floor after what you sent us today, which is, I don't even know how to frame this. A person who's been following your work and our work for a long time, who has been a very powerful, I don't know what you'd call it, advocate for justice, who has 3 times gotten things on the docket of the Supreme Court, recently got his 3rd thing on the docket of the Supreme Court, and it is in response to Trump's emergency order that says, if you know of anyone meddling with our election, tell me. So he wrote up the most amazing writ of mandamus, which includes your work, the work of the Americans for Innovation. It includes the Ames work, the American Intelligent Media work, and a lot of other stuff that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that at the last election and during this election, there is foreign interference, and they used the indictable information from the Americans for Innovation timeline and a lot of stuff that we've done cooperatively with them to add as the proof of this. And what they're demanding is that there be a paper ballot backing up every single ballot in the next upcoming election, the midterm election. And you have, with James Miller, whose name appears principally in this because he did a writ of mandamus in the state of Washington, it appears in this document again and again, the work that he did, but also it highlights that the proof that we're being meddled with came from the researchers that you are connected with for Americans for Innovation and our researchers. So I was shocked, Michael. I was so shocked.
Yes.
It's now the Supreme Court
of serendipity.
The Supreme Court is going to consider this stuff, which has in it embedded information about the senior executive service members, Optech, all the election devices that are all rigged.
We had no idea they were doing this. This came as I forwarded that document to you. It was equally a shock to me.
Well, we've both talked to him since. I just got off the phone with him, and he's going to have a conversation with us tomorrow, hopefully with Harold William Van Allen, the man who was the lawyer who helped write this writ of mandamus, submitted it to Homeland Security, the Supreme Court, and Michael Pence, because Michael Pence just said that he asked people, turn in any information you have of any election rigging corruption, because he's the chair of a committee that Trump appointed to make sure there's integrity in this election. So it's been delivered. It's on the docket because of its magnitude, I guess. Maybe you can explain those kind of things, but I just think that we have to give a shout out to James Miller and to all the people that work so hard in many different states to try to do this. And then they turned him down in Washington, and they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to consider your request to have legal elections after the election."
Right.
So, what do you think about this? Is this going to go somewhere? Is this going to really come to the light? Is this going to come to President Trump's attention?
Well, I don't know. We will have to see, but one of the things that I learned long ago from a golfer from South Africa named Gary Player is the line, "The harder I work, the luckier I get." So it appears that God is shining down upon us, and that we've got other smart people around the country that are picking up these seeds that we've been planting. And they created quite a document, which I assume Betsy's going to link to this video.
Oh, Betsy's going to link that in the production notes below and in the description box below. Notice how I said those 2 things like I know what those are. Wasn't that good?
That was good.
Yeah, well, I can be trained. It's hard, as you well know, but I can be trained. So
you've heard her say that so many times.
Yes, and this time I actually memorized it so that I could repeat it. So, what I'm seeing is Betsy has sent out kind of like a flash notice on this. Of course, she's going to keep sending out more on this, but she sent out the whole document. It's 331 pages, I believe, and the indictable evidence is there. Anyone who looks at this evidence can see beyond a shadow of a doubt that our elections have been rigged for a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what they're going to see when they read this document?
Yeah, the full document includes all the exhibits. So the actual writ, petition for a writ, is, I didn't count the pages, maybe 15 or 20 pages. So it doesn't take that long to read it. The front of it's a little bit, well, it's a lot legalese, but get through that to the actual statement about the election rigging, and it's quite a read. And clearly these guys know what they're doing. They've done it many times before, as is described in the writ itself. And it's just astounding that the court picked it up. So who knows what's going to happen. But let's pray that God's Holy Spirit shines on our Supreme Court and we see some actions from this.
It's not really asking much to have a paper backup for electronic votes. Because why?
You wouldn't think so.
Electronic machines. Anybody ever hear of an IT problem? Anybody ever hear of PC Anywhere that can actually change the votes on most of the election machines in America? Anybody ever hear of Mitt Romney and his son Tag that run, Interheart Civic? 17 states in this midterm will be manipulated.
They've included all of that.
Yeah, it's all in this document, and basically that's the kind of thing that, it's yourself, ourselves, and all these other people, and James and all these other groups that have brought this forward and said, look, this is what we need. We need to now have a legal election in America because for so long, the Diebold machines were ran by the Republicans, and now it's the Interheart Civic that's ran by a certain Republican, that would be Mitt Romney. And then you go to the Sequoia machines or the ES&S machines or the whatever. They're ran by factions, and they literally buy out these contracts. And though they know these machines could be rigged, at a recent conference that we had junior high school students showing that in less than 2 minutes they can get into any one of these machines and change votes. We've already seen that these machines with the Diebold machines in Ohio, you were a big part of that. And in this writ of mandamus written by Christopher Strunk and
studying it, not implementing it.
What's that?
I wasn't a big part of implementing the Diebold corruption. I was
That's good.
involved studying.
I'm glad that you weren't, because there were like 200 lawyers in Ohio who worked on this forever, and nothing came of it. And yet,
it just dragged out through the courts for many years. I think it started in 2005 and was finally dumped completely in 2012. So that's the way our legal system, when they want to kill something, they just drag it out until everybody gets tired of dealing with it.
Yeah, we see that all the time, don't we?
That we have got to change this system. It is broken.
Well, I like the fact that someone like Christopher Strunk and Harold William Von Allen can use the system against itself. And chatting with him today, he said, well, I'm sorry we had to do it, but we had to create a constitutional crisis. I said, that's good, Christopher. I'm very happy that you decided to create a constitutional crisis, because basically this is foreign interference in our elections, sedition, treason, and the one thing we hold the most sacred, our right to vote, and for that vote to be counted.
I don't think it gets any clearer than the last Americans for Innovation article discussing Sir Nicholas Clegg and his takeover of Facebook as the Minister of Propaganda. I'm sorry, Global Affairs and Communications. What am I thinking? And the fact that he is the former Deputy Prime Minister of England come over to take over Facebook, it doesn't get any clearer than that, folks.
Well, I don't know. There's one stage left, and that's if George Soros replaces Dude Zuckerberg.
Well, I guess so.
Because he gave $1.5 billion to the Atlantic Council to take over Facebook through a group that has become the Truth Ministry in Europe, which we've been harping on. No one else seems to notice it. I think I saw one thing that was written about it, and then we had to go do the research to make sure that it was true. But the Atlantic Council has a group called the Digital Forensic Research Laboratory, and they're the new AI. They're the new free speech squelch robot. They are the new standard that Facebook is applying to the whole world. And the standard goes between Chinese Dragonfly system, social credit system, where they simply can look at your face and tell if you're committing a crime and put you in jail, to...
Yeah, what they're doing, Douglas, is they are developing these computer programs that are basically act like listeners. So they listen to the digital traffic going by them, and they can throttle back or disconnect certain connections coming through that river of bits without breaking the system. And that's always been the big challenge. How do you make exceptions for certain people or certain groups without completely shutting down the whole system? And that's what's taken so long to figure out. But they're starting to figure it out, and that's what they're beta testing in China with the social credit score. And it's probably working better than they thought. I think they're accelerating. It seems they're accelerating their plan to essentially overwhelm President Trump with all these activities on so many in so many circles that they won't be able to catch up with it until they've actually accomplished their goal.
And Christopher Strunk, in this beautiful writ of mandamus, points out that Optech is the software that runs all these electronic election machines. And he did such good research. I just don't think anybody could have hit the nail on the head any better than what he pulled as the evidence to support this demand, really, to have free and accurate elections that then can be substantiated afterwards. And that's the big trick. Why would there ever be any problem with somebody saying, oh, we need a recount? Well, we can't because it's digital. That's what happened with the soldiers, I think, in 2016.
Well, I can tell you from my personal experience at dealing with our courts why none of us think it's going to happen. Because what happens in our courts right now is when there's a complaint about some judicial misconduct, somebody files a complaint with the court, and inevitably the judge comes back with slapping down the person who filed the complaint, and they get away with it under a doctrine called judicial discretion. And so using the doctrine of digital discretion, these courts can slow walk anything where their misconduct comes to light. And this is why none of us, why I particularly, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but why I am very discouraged by the state of affairs in our judicial system, because these judges are a part of this corruption because they've been selected. These people who have been put in these positions, many of them are quite well compensated for providing decisions that assist the people that are paying them. Only we don't know who's paying them. That's the problem. And so consequently, it's such a shock that we think that something like this could gain some traction. But the exciting thing about Christopher Strunk and his partners is these guys have been to this game before, and they're well heeled in the Washington scene, and they've done their homework. This is a very well done presentation.
Yes, and they built on the some ideas from the Center for Self-Governance, but also the work that was done out in Washington State, and they absorbed everything that was really to the point and refined it. And because they have all this experience, and because it's not just them, it's a group of them that have been doing this for some time, they already have a name, and they've already been given recognition for work that they've done before. So we hope that they just won't be thrown out because they think that there's some kind of crackpot or something like that. But what is really beautiful is it's indictable evidence. So if John Roberts doesn't pass this down the line after it reaches him, and it was already been put on the docket, if he doesn't pass it down the line to look at, and if none of those judges have eyes or ears, then as they're looking at this indictable evidence, they'd really have to cover their eyes and plug their ears and not hear what anybody's telling them, because the evidence is so clear. It is so 100% there and perfectly clear and transparent what's going on. We go back through the research and demonstrate exactly when these things were done, give the indictable evidence, who did it, when, why, how it works, everything from man in the middle to Optech being developed in Venezuela, to the machines being rigged from the beginning, to who owns the machines, to how they can be adjusted, how they can be manipulated, how they can be manipulated by a junior high school student. And also Christopher Strunk does not hold back in telling the truth about the atmosphere that allowed this to happen. And so in very clear legal terms, he says it somewhat nicely, but he pretty much calls a spade, and he names the deep state for who the deep state is, which is the senior executive service, what we call the shadow government. And he throws in so much information for justification that just reading it will be such a red pill for someone who hasn't experienced this before, that alone, the fact that we just push it out and that people read it and that they even get parts of it, will be a huge success. Because, Betsy had said that when we saw the work that James Miller was doing, maybe we'll get him on the line, have a conversation, because he's worked so hard. And he was thwarted severely by the powers that be, that his story itself tells you a lot about this judicial system that you're talking about. But we saw this writ of mandamus and made sure that through Truth News Headlines and all of our friends pushed it out to everybody and said, do this in your own state. And we had no idea.
It's been amazing how quickly that's gotten out.
And then he picked this up and did it in New York.
If I can make a recommendation, Douglas, when somebody reads it, the first part of it is dealing with the legal basis for their argument. And what you need to do is not try to understand it so much, but just persevere through it, because it's very technical. But what these guys have done is they have established their legal standing to make this claim, and that's what the beginning of that argument is. It is complicated, but they've worked through it. They've established their legal standing to make this claim and ask the court to intervene. And there's lots of issues with prior filings and things they've done in lower courts and that kind of thing. And then also they've referenced specifically these recent executive orders that the president has signed relative to the national emergency, and specifically the request that President Trump made to he asked the public, if anyone knows anything that's going on relative to threats to our election, please let me know. And that's the amazing thing. These guys did let him know. This document is amazing.
And Michael Pence, in charge of the integrity of the election, he gets a copy too. So this should wake him up. It should red pill him. And if he shares it with anybody in the committee, it should point them in the direction they need to be looking so that they can catch him red-handed this time.
The interesting thing is the person who took service received the document at the Department of Homeland Security is an SCS member from the Bush administration. So it will be interesting how these embedded bureaucrats address this subject. And I think if patriots around the country and around the world shine a light on this particular document, they will not be able to brush it under the carpet.
And I believe that with the caravan, with the border, with the elections, the rigging of the elections, we have reached critical mass, folks. It is critical mass. There are enough of us in our consciousness that are pushing in the right direction that things like this can happen. So if Michael Pence, our vice president, says, whoa, what are you saying? This was given to the Supreme Court? What? It's on the docket? Well, geez, we might have to make this very public for everyone so that everyone could be alerted to these things. And even if through circumstantial evidence, as we have so much circumstantial evidence with Hillary and her corruption in the primary rigging with Bernie, or with
circumstantial, hard evidence. It's hard evidence.
Yes, but I mean, it's,
you were being nice.
It's circumstantial because she's a Democrat, she's a mobocrat, she's a demon rat, and no one can ever question Hillary because Hillary is taking her cue from the Queen, and Hillary has become the digital monarch of the world. And because of that, nobody messes with her because she can simply cause them to have an IT problem, or things come up missing, or things come up put on their computer. It doesn't really matter. The point is that is why Hillary has done what Hillary has done. And unfortunately, she trusted too much in her digital kingdom and the efforts of Eric Schmidt and the efforts of Dude Zuckerberg and all the other social media giants who were 100% Democrat, as well as the mainstream media. She still couldn't get elected. So this time, we're going to see them pull out every single shenanigan they can, and they're going to do everything they can. But unfortunately, Trump is already ahead of them. The executive order says, I dare you to mess with our elections. And I've said before, since China has already messed with our elections, I promise you that Trump already put new sanctions on them, but secret sanctions through the U.S. Treasury Department. He warned everyone in the world he was going to do this. And so come on over, Sir Nick Clegg, and take over Facebook. But you know what? I've already given you a warning. He's warned everyone. So if they're going to go out and cheat...
He's subject to American laws when he steps foot in this country, especially as an officer of an American corporation.
Exactly. And Stephen Halper, having dual citizenship, doesn't get you out of being Christopher Steele's handler, the person who created the Russian dossier. And eventually we will see these connections. Spygate is really British Spygate. And as the midterm passes, and I just got through hearing some really encouraging information, I don't want to go into great detail, but things that I truly believe that support what we've been saying, and it looks as if 100% it is a red tsunami, based upon all kinds of statistical facts and other such things I was just examining. But that was before I heard about this amazing thing that one of your followers, one of the people who believes that Leader Technologies needs to have the Miller Act signed by President Trump and take down Dude Zuckerberg and all the rest of the social media, Eric Schmidt, take down Google, take down Alphabet before Alphabet becomes the new dragonfly here in America and basically begins to do what they've already done in China right here in America. Take down a George Soros, who's been the money behind election corruption, particularly financial election corruption. And all he has to do is give back to Leader Technologies what was stolen, and then we can take the surveillance and the nonsense and the weaponization out of all of these social media, Silicon Valley, I don't even know what to call it, warlord kings who have taken over our life, and we can turn it back to the people where information can be free again. So thank you, Christopher Strunk, for doing what you've done, because it was so encouraging for us to see the astounding amount of work you did without saying one word to anybody until you had filed it and it was on the docket, and then you informed Michael.
That's the amazing thing.
It's just that so much is going on out there is what surprises me, and every day that I'm out on the internet, I see all kinds of stuff that we've done, that you've done, that our partners have done, that are broken up, put into pieces, and delivered in different ways. And we want to thank all those people for doing that. So we want to just give a heartfelt thank you to anyone who is taking up the cause for the true republic and the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, and for having honest elections and giving patents back to the creators who made them instead of giving them over to Hillary, who's become the digital monarch of the world because of stolen patents. So Hillary's mentioned in this writ of mandamus, and her crimes are clearly painted all across the pages. So when you read this, push it out to other people. We want to get it into the hands. We know it's in the last minute, but it's in these last minutes that people who are undecided decide. And if someone read this who didn't know any of this, it's one of the best condensations, best summaries, best I don't know, best delivery in terms of a legal delivery of what we've been trying to get across for the last few months about how critical this election is and how we have to stop the digital manipulation of our elections.